The idea that I wanted to bring to you guys today has been kind of boiling around in my head ever since I started at the apologetics program at Houston Baptist with Byron, and we started kicking around. He's telling me, he's like, you got to come, I got this thing. And I'm like, yeah, I know you, TD. I used to teach there. I got that. And this idea is, I used to be in design. I taught game design. A couple of you have taken my game design class. Who in here has taken my game design class? Yeah, okay. Hi. And so some of the slides that I'm going to show you tonight, you're going to look at and you're going to go, wait, I remember that. It's like really familiar. Because I literally just like copied and pasted some of those game design slides. Because one of the things that I always wanted to talk about in those classes and never could was this idea of the creative act as a human being. And where does it come from? What is so special about that? Why is it that when we create, we feel like we're in this zone, this special, almost kind of magical, supernatural place? How many of you are creative types? You draw, you design, you do something of that kind. Okay, cool. And how many of you know what I'm talking about, even if you're not? Okay, there you go. We're all on the same page. Excellent. Good. Well, Byron gave me a great introduction, so I feel like I don't really even need to fully introduce myself. But I am Adam Bracken, Doc to my friends, and I picked up the nickname back whenever I actually co-owned a school. It was a private school for kids with learning differences, and the reason that I was called Doc specifically is because it was a family business. My wife was there, my mom was there, my dad was there. So though that was a lot of Dr. Brackens under one roof, and we all just kind of went, what? Whenever somebody said Dr. Bracken. So I took Doc specifically and started signing my emails that way, and then it just carried over, and everybody here called me that too. So I guess that's who I am and forever will be. But if you want to see some of the stuff that I've done, feel free to go over to adambracken.com. I keep it fairly current. Most recently, I had a book come out that was this Understanding Minecraft, which I have a chapter in, and then there was another one that I wrote about fictopersonal communication, which is the idea of having relationships with fictional people. Yeah, that's a thing. So I write some really weird stuff. I do weird stuff. Game design is just one of the things that I have done in the past, but I really love anything transmedia, anything that has to do with being a comic book and also a TV series and also a movie and also you name it, right? So that's like my thing. That's the thing that really gets me up in the morning. And that's a shot of my website there. And that's great, but at the same time, I wanted to continue designing, and so recently where I've been continuing to design is at docandkruger.com, and Chris Kruger is a former student, and if you've had a couple hundred students and you are tapped on the shoulder to say, hey, I want to design with you or hang out with you or play games with you, then no, you probably got something good going on. So I really enjoy the things that we do over at Doc and Kruger. We did a Kickstarter that was unfunded, which is the best kind of Kickstarter of all, because then you don't have to do anything. But we've actually been doing some various types of role-playing games, that sort of thing. Actually, Brian right there, Brian McKittrick and I just recently submitted to the 200-word RPG challenge. We're waiting for the 400 entries to be judged on that one. Hopefully one of us will win, because there's big money involved, right? Well, I don't know. Okay. All right, so enough about me. Let's talk about what we're really about here to talk about, which is games and God. Two things that aren't usually talked about together. But we got to start with what is a game. So who in here has owns a game, played a game, or knows someone who does? Okay, good. In all seriousness, what is a game? Have you thought about this question? I know two of you have. What would you say a game is? Go ahead and let's get this to the interactive portion. So let's just shout it out.
First of all, do you mean game as in just playing game or game as in video game in particular?
Excellent question. Yes.
So, okay, it's the more general one, I guess.
That right there, the fact that you had to ask that question says, wait a minute, hold on, before we can even begin defining game, we have to define game. Right? What, are we talking about this kind of game or this kind of game, right? Okay, so what I guess how I will answer your question in seriousness is saying, give me some qualities that are shared.
Between video games and what I consider more regular games?
Right.
Well,
Board games or anything else, yeah.
Well, they're generally supposed to be fun.
Excellent.
It's kind of hard to say because if you're just doing game as extremely broad, including just playing, like when you're little and playing pretend with friends, that's a game too.
That's right. Yeah.
Or, they usually have rules of some sort.
True, true.
That's-
What? I love where you're going with this. Let's see if some others are in the same wavelength. Yeah, hairy guy in the back who I have no idea who it is.
Something with a win or loss stake.
Thank you, Brad Paris. Yes, something with a win or loss state. Victory conditions would be another way to say that. Yeah.
I was going to follow up with her comment is you have to have some type of rules to the game because if
Rules to the game.
because if you get some type of codes to type in that takes away, like you can't die or you get unlimited bullets or whatever, all of a sudden it's fun for a little bit, but then it's not fun anymore.
Yeah.
At least for me. So you almost have to have a mission or rules to keep you engaged.
Very nice. Over there.
Working towards desired outcomes within specific parameters.
Ooh. Now you've done this before. You write dictionaries? What you got?
Probably contains some kind of challenging aspect to it.
Yeah, there has to be a challenge of some kind, right? You might fail, in other words. Give me the rest. Let's bring it home.
I was just actually saying that I don't think the win and loss condition applies as much because there are plenty of games that don't have them. Like, actually, the creative mode of Minecraft. What is the win and loss condition of that? But it's still a game and no one challenges that.
The answer to that question is whenever you fall into lava, lose all your stuff, and the big game over, because it says game over.
Okay, technically, but you either have to have no idea about the game, be dumb, or just...
That's a brilliant insight. And in fact, I actually wrote on that in my chapter in the Understanding Minecraft book. And the answer to the question, in all seriousness, is every moment, every second that you haven't lost, you're winning. That's the genuine answer to that question. And that ties back into some of my ending points in life. So I'm really glad you said that. Okay, well, let's move on, because I think we have enough for a working definition at least. But let's look at some examples, because that's always a good thing to do. Oh, hello, sensitive mouse. Is this a game?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Is this a game?
If you were actually playing poker.
If you were actually, no, it is a JPEG image of dogs playing poker based on the famous art. Yes, okay. Tough crowd, boy. Okay, yes, but the poker is an actual game, right? Can this be a game?
Yes.
Notice how I rephrased my question. Is this a game?
Yes.
Bonus points if you know what this game is. Heroescape. Who said it? Who's that? Oh, very nice. The old man said it. You've played Heroescape with me, though, haven't you, Will?
No, I haven't.
You haven't? You missed it?
I just remember the commercials.
Oh, man, we got to bring that up on Saturday night one of these times. Okay. Anyway, how about this? Is this a game?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Is this a game?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what do all these games have in common? I'm not asking the question again. I'm just restating the question. And here is here's the working answer for tonight. Okay? The first thing I heard said is defined rules. Second thing, defined space. Kind of said it. I'm going to differentiate between that and a given set of components. And what we also said, which was a set of victory conditions. Let's change the verb on all of these so that it's defined. Okay? So what we've got is a place to game, stuff to game with, rules so we know how we're going to play the game, and then the all-important knowing when we've won, so we can stop playing the game. Now, already it has been pointed out that Minecraft does not necessarily fit into this mold. So I want you to imagine, just like circles, that anything that can be defined this way is a game, but there's also games that aren't necessarily defined this way. Okay? So we're drawing a circle, and we're saying everything that's within this circle we could call a game as a working definition for tonight. So when I'm talking about games, we all know what it is that I'm talking about. Okay? Questions at this point?
Does this include life?
Yes, but that's my last slide, so we'll get there. Yeah, spoilers. All right, so this is actually what I am going to talk about tonight. This is like everything I'm going to talk about. Here's for all you bottom-up people who are like, yeah, but what's your point? Okay, well, this is going to be the point. We're going to talk about what are games, or rather we already did. What do games have to do with games? That's our next thing. And then we're going to talk about God, so we're going to say, what is God? And then we're going to say, what does God have to do with God? And then what do games have to do with God, which is kind of the whole reason that we're here. But you know what? Games are kind of the hook for tonight, so everything will be in the context of games, even the God part. Yes?
What is the defined space for video games?
Oh, excellent. It is anywhere that doesn't have an invisible wall. Anywhere your character can go.
Okay, yeah, and your characters are going to be the elements you can play with.
Absolutely right.
Okay.
And the stuff you interact with, and the level, and all of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Great question. All right, so what do games have to do with games? So my mic will pick it up.
Hey, I'm Ken Levine. I'm the creative director of Irrational Games, and we're here for another look at BioShock. I'm here with Dean, the level builder, and I'm going to show you one of the coolest things about the game, which is that you can approach anything in BioShock in multiple different ways. And we're actually going to do the same room 3 different times. He took care of those spicers. You notice he's not attacking the Big Daddy. The Big Daddy's not attacking him either. He's just defending his little sister. Things so far so good. Dean heads down to the mud field. Ambushed by a turret. And from above. Oh, he's being ambushed from all over the place. All right, Dean, get out of there. You're gonna kill. All right, so we're gonna try this again. Dean's gonna try to use the environment, and this is a key to BioShock. Use the environment to his advantage. Maybe use maybe the enemies to his advantage. So you approach that turret. Shut it down with electro bolt, and hack into it and take control. These guys up with an incinerate, and they run for the body of water. Dean then uses the water to conduct electricity to kill them all. You see the security camera up there. Watch out for it, Dean. But maybe we can use that to our advantage in a minute. We also see a trap that the enemy has set. Now, Dean can use telekinesis to take that trap bolt and reposition it in the world. This is something we just found out while we were testing the game once, that it worked, and we incorporated it into the game. Now he's covering his flank as he advances onwards.
Always wanted to be. Come and visit us at the Midback. Here to visit this comedy
His flank is covered by the electro bolt. Just killed the first guy. He uses security beacon. The camera is now his friend. He sends in bots to fight those guys. Dean's done much better this time. So, Dean went through that space really well last time. It's one thing he didn't do. This time, Dean needs to get through the room, but he also needs to take down the Big Daddy to get the little sister. Freezes this guy. Shattered. Okay, now there's a Big Daddy out there. Let's turn him into our ally by shooting a rage at him. And he's going to go after the enemies. Our enemies. Not his enemies. Now, enemies come in with a bot that the enemy's controlling. He hacks in the bot, takes control, and steals it from him. Now it's time to deal with the Big Daddy. He's pissed as and setting some traps. Tripwires. Proximity mines. And there she is. Dean's defeated the Big Daddy. Now he has to choose. Do we harvest the atom from her? Do we try to rescue her, turn her back into what she once was? And that's a choice we leave up to the player in BioShock.
All right. So I would have always said to my game design class, what did you see, what did you hear? But I've gone ahead and put a cheat sheet up for you here. Let's talk about what, from a game perspective, you saw. What seemed to be the theme that came out that was interesting to you? Maybe something you thought of and then you're like, oh, there it is. Yes?
Creative ways to get through the level and take down enemies in particular.
Perfect. What else?
Using the environment to advantage.
To your advantage, yeah.
And then even Big Daddy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Your enemies.
Replayability, that's big. Yeah. How many of you have played BioShock? Okay, yeah, that's about what I would expect. About 25% of you or so. What about like the sequel or any of the sequels or anything? Probably, yeah, yeah. I liked 2 better than 1 personally. I thought that was.
I got so creeped out I had to turn it off.
Oh, there you go. Well, I'm probably in some kind of trouble because I'm here to talk about God and I show you BioShock. I don't know. That's got to be some kind of negative points or something. I don't know. Well, let's go through this though. What you've got is multiple different ways to get through the same space. You can run and gun it. You can use the environment, or you can just use the boss to your advantage. Think of it in terms of boss fights, that kind of thing, right? Now, that Big Daddy, he was there to protect the little sisters, and he's the boss, mini bosses, really. But until you attack him, what happens? Yeah, he ignores you, this was kind of innovative. And by the way, this is an older game, but I'm showing it to you because I want you to think about it in terms of what was new when it came out. This is important. A lot of this stuff, we're like, yeah. A lot of games do this. This one was one of the first. And honestly, it's one of the few series, if you will, that has retained some of these elements. The idea of using ambush mechanics, not just the enemies ambushing you, but you being able to ambush the enemies. This becomes important. You can stealth through the space. You can attack the space, run and gun through the space, or you can do it other ways. What other games can you think of that allow you to do this now that have come out since then? Yeah?
The Arkham series.
Arkham series, good example.
Deus Ex.
Deus Ex, definitely.
Assassin's Creed.
Yes, oh, very much so. Any others come to mind?
Even Skyrim a little bit with traps.
Yeah, actually, that's very true. That's very true. The point is that this is a really common and good type of design nowadays. So what's neat about this game, or what was neat about this game, is that whereas before you were a Space Marine and it really didn't matter, you were in the space and you were a Space Marine and you're playing and you're a Space Marine and I'm a Space Marine and that kind of a thing. Now we have the idea of your character as you're playing is different from my character as I'm playing. And so I might use plasmids a different way. I might even find the ones that you find. Whether I choose to hack or basically buy off other things, I might ignore that entirely, I might stealth through, I might not. Did you catch the combo that he used? That was really cool. Hit it with fire, it runs toward water because it's smart enough to do that, and then when it's in the water, you electrocute it. Oh, the irony, right? And this is like my single favorite thing about that video. If I hadn't blown so much time trying to get the thing to work, I would replay that section, which was the tripwire. Recall for me what happened when he talked about that tripwire. He moved it. So what?
It wasn't intended.
Yeah, he didn't design it that way. They didn't design. Hundreds of people worked in this game. I'm not just going to say Levine. I mean, he probably never touched the keyboard. But the truth is, yeah, that they discovered something in testing that they had never designed it to do. How? How can that be? Because computers are magic, right? No. No. Give me a real reason. I want a real reason how that could possibly be.
Probably.
What?
Programmer mistake.
No.
No, this is a flush off thing. Just go off and put the,
What do you mean?
Well, it comes down one way and it's the yes and no, and it's, you go here, yes to do this and no to that. Well, they didn't finish.
You may be saying the right thing in a language that I don't speak. It's entirely possible. Here's the answer.
They programmed the tripwire thing to be able to be a movable object.
Okay.
Telekinetics could pick it up. They didn't program it so that if it were moved, it would detonate.
You're really, really close. Because they did not program the tripwire to be a movable object. What they did was they set properties for objects, which is they're movable by telekinesis. And then they set property on the tripwire that it is an object. Otherwise, it wouldn't stick in the wall. It needs to be an object, right? So that whenever they discovered that the physics within the game was realistic enough that it behaved like we would expect it to behave, they left it. It was an emergent property within the context of the design of that game. And they went, oh, wow, that's so cool. Of course that's the way it should work. But it wasn't something that was originally in the game design document, the spec for the game. It just happened to be there because it was really good design. Okay, stick that idea in your head. We're going to come back to it later. The last thing, of course, is the moral choice. Do I harvest or do I rescue? Typo. The game has been criticized for being a very weak moral choice, being binary and flowcharts and all that. But the truth is, in a first-person shooter like this, where you're going through a space and it's I kill or I don't be killed and there's zombies and blah, 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 the idea of there being a moral choice at all, no matter how binary, was revolutionary at the time. It was a big deal at the time. Nowadays, we've gotten to a different place where you've got like Telltale games that has these narrative games, and if you've played like Walking Dead, at the very beginning, you make a choice and it pops up and it says the little girl will remember that. It was like the single most powerful gaming moment for me ever in like 30 years of gaming. And it was that, wait a minute, one of the game characters is actually going to remember something. This was a meaningful moral choice. I actually literally rewound, reloaded, started from the beginning, and made a different choice that was a more moral choice aligned to my own personal psychology because of that text that popped up and said she will remember that. Yeah.
By the way, when did BioShock come out?
Oh, 2006, 7? Yeah. Yeah, so about 10 years ago. All right, I know. Well, in video game terms, it is. That was 3 generations ago. So, okay, so we asked what is a game. Let's talk about what is a video game. This is a definition. I pulled it off of Wikipedia, so that's a reliable source. But I liked it, so we stuck with it. A computer video game is an electronic game that involves interaction with a user interface to generate visual feedback on a video device. That sounds like a dictionary definition. But basically what it means is we're going to put the game into a system. The system is going to behave the rules and enact those for us. We're going to interact with it. We've got input, we've got output, we've got a visual output, that kind of a thing, and that's a video game. Now we've got these computers that we keep in our pants all the time. We can play games on. I just got into the beta for Exploding Kittens mobile yesterday, so that was pretty cool. The social media person who does all of that and did the big storm of millions and millions of people on it. She went to UTD, by the way. So, yeah, Bella Cavello is her name. Anyway, what is gameplay then? Rouse, who's a writer, textbook, that kind of thing, says the component of computer games that is found in no other art form is
Interactivity.
yes, interactivity. Because whenever we think about games, any kind of game, board game, mind game, computer game, if it's not interactable, it's not a game. It's already in a set state, right? The whole point of playing a game is to see how it comes out this time because I interacted with it. It's a system. So as game designers then, we have to figure out what determines the something of the gameplay. Any guesses?
Outcome.
What? Outcome, good. Any other guesses? Result, yeah. Those are all right, by the way. It's not the word I have up there, but those are right. Form, okay? It's the form of the gameplay. In other words, what is it that I want my players to do? What do I want those users to do? So the idea of coming up with and fleshing out on paper usually, or in some other way, a game is the act of game design. And usually this is a game design document. So if you took my game design class or any other game design class here on campus, you've done a game design document. And it was probably the longest thing you ever wrote because they're usually about 300 pages. And the ones that you do for the assignment are about 30 pages. And that's big. But it's still just kind of bones. It's a framework. It's the, you know what, I want this game to be kind of like this. And so some game design documents can be a page. Some of them can be written on a cocktail napkin, like the one for Pac-Man was. Hey, what if we did a thing? And he drew a drawing, and he's like, can you make that? Yeah, I can. So another way to say it, it's kind of the way I like to say it, is the act of deciding what a game should be. If you've done that, if you've ever done that, even as a little kid, if you were like, let's make up a game, you're a game designer. You've designed a game. So when we ask who is a game designer, we can talk about these guys being game design companies, but really anybody who determines what the nature of gameplay is by creating the game's design is a game designer. The process of making a game is, it starts from the plan, and it ends with the user. It's actually been argued that as an art form, games have three artists. The first is the designer. The second is the developer, the one who does all those assets. And then the third, can you guess? The player. Because that iteration is all about that individual. All right. So that's how games relate to games. Let's shift gears for a second. Let's talk about God. What is God? Well, there's a lot of definitions of God. Again, I want to throw kind of a circle out there where we can say God may be more than these things. But if we say these things, we're talking about God. Okay? Same kind of operation here. God is self-existent. He is all-powerful. He is supremely intelligent, and he is personal. That's the God we're talking about here. Now, as a theist, not necessarily a Christian or a Jew or someone else who believes in multiple gods, polytheism, that sort of a thing, you might differ on the particulars of a God, but this is the God that I'm wanting to talk to you about tonight because it's the God I believe in. So this is the infinite God, the unimaginably powerful God, the all-knowing and supremely intelligent God, and the personal God. And these four things are derived specifically out of the four arguments that I want to talk to you about, which are the four classic arguments for the existence of God. So that brings us very, very quickly then to the idea of, what does God have to do with God? And the four arguments for God's existence are the cosmological argument, the teleological argument, the moral argument, and the ontological argument. All right, back to the interactive portion. Who knows what the cosmological argument is in general terms? Yeah.
It's the argument for God from the causation of the universe, or from causation.
Yeah.
From causation.
It's basically, we're here, the universe exists, therefore God must, because if creation exists, there must have been a creator, right? That's in simple terms. I mean, I'm sure that Thomas Aquinas or somebody would have at me for oversimplifying it, but for tonight, that's okay. You know, take a different course that's more expansive, but that works. How about the teleological argument? If you know your Greek, then teleos would be your clue, but right. Not just the idea that it's a created universe, but that it's a designed universe, very specifically designed. I'm fairly convinced that either we are made for this planet or this planet is made for us based on the idea that I match the banana, in that when I eat it, it becomes part of me. Right? I am part of this universe. I'm not an alien. I didn't come out of another dimension. There's some kind of a design element at work here. Right? The next is the moral argument. Who knows this one? If you don't know, I'll punch you in the face and explain it to you. See what I did there? One way to say it would be that there's an objective morality. In order for there to be an objective morality, we would basically need for there to be a being which is objectively moral, and so on and so forth. The last one's the ontological argument. You know this one? Because perfection requires actualization in order to be perfect. Yeah, nailed it. Excellent. You guys are awesome. I'm going to put this into our terms then, okay? The walk-away terms. The four common arguments for the existence of God, what God has to do with God, is that there's an argument from creation, an argument from design, an argument from morality, and an argument from being. So then, what does God have to do with games? I have more videos. Hopefully they will work.
Portal is, for us, one of the most exciting things that's happened in games in a long time, and it's also a great extension of the Valve philosophy in that it came to us from a group of 7 students who were graduating the DigiPen Institute of Technology here in Redmond, Washington.
Every year, DigiPen holds an expo for graduating seniors to try and bring in developers to take a look at students' projects and hopefully get them jobs. So a couple people from Valve swung by and took a look at our project and apparently thought it was interesting enough to invite us to come into Valve.
They came in and demoed the game for us, and about halfway through their demo, Gabe just stopped them cold and said, "You guys must come work at Valve and create your next project here on the Source engine." And 2 years later, we have Portal as the experimental piece of the Orange Box.
Portal is a mind-bending puzzle game that allows you to manipulate and bend 3D space to your will. The story in Portal is that you are a test subject in the Aperture Science Laboratories. You're basically used as a rat in a maze to try and test the portal weapon. The portal gun works by giving you the ability to create 2 dynamically linked portals. You have an orange portal and a blue portal. If you go in the blue portal, you'll come out the orange portal, and if you go in the orange portal, you'll come out the blue. One of our favorite portal techniques is called the fling. So what you do is you place one portal close by your feet, and you place another portal behind you, high up on a wall. If you jump in the portal, you'll come flinging out the portal that's really high up in the air. We use this for all sorts of puzzles later on in the game. We hope that the portal gun will change players' expectations much in the same way that the gravity gun did for Half-Life 2. With the gravity gun, players were able to manipulate physics in a way they never had before. And in Portal, you're able to manipulate 3D space in a way that you never had before.
This next test is impossible.
Any Portal fans? Yeah. Good old Portal.
There's always a way out.
All right, so the argument from creation is that since the universe exists, it must have been caused by something beyond itself. You catch the Sims in the background there? What's interesting about Portal that ties into this argument from creation specifically? Challenging your brain here to make a connection. First of all, who was the person being interviewed there? Did you catch it? Yeah. Yeah. Mythical thing known as a game design student. One of the level designers, right? So it's kind of neat that this game that so many of you said, oh yeah, I like that game, actually came out of a student project. Okay. Now, what if we were to say that game was created by Valve? Would that be a true statement?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would. Okay, because Valve put out that game. Is it a precisely accurate statement? How can we be more precise with that statement? Mm-hmm. Based on an idea from a student project, which was intellectual property that was brought in and developed over the course of 2 years. And the team of people, look at the credits, who worked on this, and that these people made it. All of those would be true statements too, right? So the point that I want to get across, and I could have used really any game here, but the point that I want to get across is that games are made by people. They're a created object, right? And we don't really dispute that they're a created object. And how is it that we know that they are a created object?
We can watch them be created or create them ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely right. We know of a time that pre-existed video games, and that's whenever we called video games board games. And we can track the history of video games. In fact, I've taught a course called The History of Video Games. And it's a relatively new thing. But I don't think anybody who said, video games aren't really made. They come into existence on their own would be taken very seriously. Because we have such really good empirical data that it's not true. The question is, do we have such empirical data for our universe? And I'm not going to attempt to answer that question this evening, but I am going to challenge you to use the same criteria that you would use on a video game with the big duh statement of, yeah, it's a created object, as you would with the universe. Let's go deeper. The teleological argument derives from the Greek word telos, meaning end or purpose. It's based on the idea that there's a hierarchy and that there's an ultimate designer, a beginning designer, if you will. This is one of my all-time favorite promos for a video game ever.
Behold the galaxy, full of stars and light and intelligence. But it wasn't always like this. Not long ago, it was cold and dark. So what happened? decision. Someone looked at a microbe and thought he could use a longer flagella and a pair of pinchers too. Yeah. Next thing you know, he's king of the ocean. Then someone decided he should hit the beach. Land creatures were born, but life on land is a dicey proposition. So someone looked at our hero and said he needs to be able to defend himself. And voila! As the saying goes, if you can't beat 'em, eat 'em. But survival depends on numbers, so someone made our little champs irresistible to the opposite sex. Now we're talking. Or mating, as the case may be. Of course, there's strength in numbers, but there's strength in sharp weaponry, too. Ironically, this led to what we call civilization. But civilization meant more competition for just about everything. Happily, someone pulled our species aside and said, "You guys need to chill out and unify this planet." So they did. They built starships, and they set out to conquer the galaxy. But what they never realized was that all along the way, from humble microbes to starship captains, someone had guided them at every turn. And that someone is you. Spore, how will you create the universe? Coming September 7th, 2008.
It came and then it went. All right. That was one of my favorite games for a very long time, actually. So, where am I going with this? Take a guess. That was a very precisely chosen video. Yeah. From a game design standpoint, the designers of this game made a very unusual choice. Not unusual if you'd played The Sims or some of the other Sim games. Sim Ant, still one of my favorite retro, terrible games. It's a horrible game, terrible game. But what weird choice did they make as a developer, as a designer, in terms of Spore?
Guide them all the way through.
Guide who?
You guide the critters, the creature, your creature.
Who's you?
Well, you're basically their creator.
Well, you're using the word you. I'm asking you, who is you?
The player.
The player. Okay, so from a technical standpoint, this is what they did. They said, here are all of our game creation tools. We're going to lock some of them down so you can't break it, but we're giving them to you. Have fun. Enjoy. Within the context of this framework, first a 2D kind of world, then a 3D kind of thing, and then it's more of an RTS, and then it's an Explore the Galaxy thing that goes on for way too long. But it really is an experiment in social behavior. It's an experiment in, can content be provided by the individual player? Now, some interesting things that were revolutionary about this game when it came out. EA created a couple of dozen, call them stock creatures, and those came with the game. But if you were connected to the internet, suddenly the creatures you were making were going to appear in other people's games with the same characteristics that you were giving them and the same way that you were playing them, and vice versa. Stuff that was appearing was created by someone somewhere out in the universe, our real universe, the internet universe. And was aggressive because they had been playing it aggressively, or was peaceful because they'd been playing it in a peaceful way. And then with 2 little clicks, you could upload massive amounts of footage and clips up to YouTube. And that was revolutionary too, because it was right in that age where we're like, what are we going to use this YouTube thing for? We're not quite sure. And so a lot of these things, these revolutionary new design ideas, it really kind of took them by surprise and by storm. And they actually had to censor some stuff and put in some player-based reporting features that weren't originally in there. And it was really an interesting study in human psychology, I would say. the ability to create and to govern a universe, that sort of a thing. Do you know about the Easter egg that's in there? It's actually in the western spiral arm. You zoom in and it's actually Earth. Let's see, it's actually in there. You have to search for a long time to find it, but it's there. I won't tell you that I will. I'll tell you that I wasted an afternoon doing that. Because I heard it was true, and it is. But this idea of creativity, why is it so important? And there have been writers who've said, like C.S. Lewis, who said, we are most like God when we create. And he actually asserted, and I think it was originally Tolkien that he was quoting, that we were most like that creative element when we were creating fairy tales specifically, because it's such a new, completely rich, different world. Now, they didn't have video games, but the truth is those two guys almost single-handedly created the rich foundation for a fantasy genre. And if not for them, we wouldn't have Dungeons & Dragons directly. I mean, that was a direct citation and quotation on the part of Gygax and company, that they basically wanted to tell more stories in the Lord of the Rings universe in Middle-earth. So they decided to create a system that they could do that in. And from those pen and paper tabletop games come our video games. So when you talk about Skyrim, really honestly, you have the Inklings who sat around in the Eagle and Child pub in Oxford and talked about their ideas and their stories. You have them to thank for it. It was almost like a role-playing group that didn't roll dice. What did they do? They told each other stories, and they drank beer. I mean, it was that sounds like role-playing to me, minus the beer, because I'm not a drinker. But the argument from design, the fine-tuning argument that is related to it, basically what we're talking about here is this idea of being not just creative. Jackson Pollock was creative, right? He was the paint splatter guy. But actually having a design, coming up with an idea for a plan for what you're going to make, and then making it. And having the tools to do so. So somebody out there, I don't know who you are, but somebody out there right now is thinking, why in the world would he choose an example that is basically gamification of evolution? I know you're thinking that. And the argument, the reason why I bring this up is the argument is you can't possibly have God and also have evolution. Now, I'm not here to convert you to theistic evolution, but I am here to challenge you, as I was before, to challenge you on your mode of thinking. Is it a binary option? Is it either God or evolution? Or could it possibly be that God used tools that maybe we don't even know about yet? We just think we've read the data right, but we haven't. Or is it okay to say that maybe if we look at the tools that were used to design this universe, that we will actually come up with those same tools that God used to design the universe? I don't know. I can honestly tell you, I don't personally have a 100% answer on that kind of a thing yet, but I research it all the time. You know, right now I am reading a really fascinating book on this. I'll hide behind the monitor and then show you. It's called God and Evolution. And just in case you're wondering whether it is a very biased book, the answer is yes, but Protestants, Catholics, and Jews explore Darwin's challenge to faith. So there you go. It's not even biased as a Christian, it's simply biased as theist. Fascinating. I definitely don't agree with a lot of the stuff that's in this book. But some of it has challenged my thinking, my binary thinking. All right, number 3, the argument from morality.
Hello, this is Jenny Barrage, and you are watching my weekly segment on youth and insight in the gaming industry. Today, we're delving into the wonderful world of narratives, my favorite part of a game, and I'm pretty sure you feel the same way as well. In this video, we'll be exploring moral choice in video games. Although the connection isn't necessary, gamers usually connect real-world ethics into their gaming experience. In many games, ethical missions and objectives are usually placed to promote heroism in the protagonist. These missions and objectives are therefore conducted by the gamer to win the game. However, what if the game wants the gamer to kill the princess instead of save her? Well then, the gamer would most likely prioritize winning the game over what they think is unethical. Gamers therefore act as a rational agent, where the gamer is inclined to choose an action in the game with the optimal expected outcome for themselves. But where does true gamer morality come in then? Well, in my humble opinion, moral development occurs when winning an objective, a mission, or a game just isn't a priority anymore. And this moral development occurs when an ethical decision is made by choice by the gamer. And game designers know that by adding these ethical implications into their game mechanics, they're adding for a deeper narrative, and therefore a more immersed gamer. And these ethical gameplays are featured in many games like Bioshock, where the gamer has a choice between rescuing or harvesting the Little Sisters, Heavy Rain, where quick time events triggers the gamer to choose plot scenarios, and Dante's Inferno, where the gamer has a karma meter with a choice of punishing or absolving non-playable characters. In all of these examples, the gamer can choose an ethical choice, not mainly for perks, but for simply doing the right thing. Let's talk about Bioshock though. The gamer is given the choice to either harvest or kill these children and in return use all of the Atom they provide, or rescue these children and get less Atom as a result. The gamer isn't given a significant reason on why they should rescue these little sisters, other than a character stating that it would be worth it for the gamer eventually. It's moral gameplay like this that turns simple game mechanics into a much more deeper narrative for the gamer. So when a gamer goes against gamer rationality for the sake of ethics, it stands for a lot. Therefore, moral choice is a very great feature to have in a game's narrative. However, Dr. Miguel Sicard, a scholar in game ethics and game studies, sees this moral gameplay as anything but moral. He states that without knowing what an ethical decision would be in the long run, the gamer isn't really making an ethical decision. Sicard stated that if game design is going to afford a decision as ethical, then it has to implement consequences or rewards to the initial choices. Otherwise, players will react to the dilemmas not with a moral stance, but with their player logic, focused on achieving their goals in the game experience. In my opinion, ethical choices, just like in real life, usually have very vague consequences and rewards. Therefore, just like in real life, the gamer has to use morality to decide what is best for the game's storyline. Do you think that moral development occurs when a gamer makes a decision? Or do you think Sicard had a valid point, claiming that the gamer needs to know the outcome of a decision for it to be ethical? Let me know in the comments below. And remember to sign up to my mailing list where all the fun happens. I'll see you all soon. Cheers and keep on gaming.
All the fun happens on our mailing list. I don't know what that means. All right, so did you catch the question? Is it true that you need to have consequences embedded within the game in order for a moral consequence or moral choices to be meaningful within the context of a game? Or can they just appear because that's the way it is in life? What's your opinion on that as a gamer? Yeah.
I feel like it's not really much of there's not really much morality involved unless there is some sort of more long-term consequence. You don't necessarily need to know what it is, but if you just make a choice and it has no actual consequence on anything that happens, then I don't consider it really to be something where morality really comes into play. Because in the real world, there are consequences even if they don't come visited back to you.
Okay, so let's talk about something we've seen a lot of tonight, video game violence. Is there a moral element or ethical element to video game violence? Or is that just the realm of video games and so it doesn't really matter?
As with real life, I think it depends on the situation of violence.
Okay.
There could be violence that's not ethical, there could be violence that is, there could be violence that's morally good and morally evil.
So you're saying within the context of the narrative, if you will, or the mechanics of the game itself, it might be different.
Yeah.
That's a really thoughtive answer, as my grandma would have said. I recently finished playing Mad Max, which was kind of a underrated game that had a lot of samey elements. I really enjoyed it, but then I also enjoyed things like Assassin's Creed, whenever it's kind of repetitive and that kind of a thing. But what's interesting about that game in that playthrough that I did is you're basically going around the wasteland killing people. That's what the main mechanic is. I'm gonna take out these guys, take over their base, and I'm going to kill them because they're bad guys, like many, many other video games. But you get to a point in there where you're actually meeting up with this guy. He's the guy you have to meet up with in order to level up your skills. And he says, are you thinking about what you're doing? So do you realize how many people you've just killed? Do you have any idea where you're headed? You used to have a wife and a kid and live a normal life. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? You're doing this for a car? Because that's the plot, by the way. Dude steals your car. His name's Lord Scrotus. Mad Max. Dude steals your car. You're going to run a chainsaw through his head and get your car back. That's the plot, right? Chainsaw doesn't kill him because it's Mad Max. And you're about 3/4 of the way or maybe a quarter of the way through this game, depending on how you play it. And this character just kind of very openly says, what are you doing? And hands you this moral dilemma on a platter. It's beautiful. It's this beautiful moment. That most people probably just skipped right past, just hit X and went right past. But I ask you, within the context of a video game, do you play yourself or do you play a character? Within the context of a tabletop role-playing game, how many of you consider yourselves tabletop role players? Pen and pencil role players? A few of you, yeah, D&D or whatever, yeah. I've literally played 50, 60, 70 different systems. That guy right there has played probably 3 times that. You've read 3 times that, definitely. And one of the things that really comes out very clearly when you read a lot of these systems and play a lot of these systems is there's either a focus on the mechanics or there's a focus on the narrative, right? So if the mechanics are designed around the idea of trash the bozos or die, kill things, take their stuff, and level up, then that's going to be very different from, can I play a game all the way through without killing anything? And you know what game I'm thinking of, Brian, right now? Undertale, yeah. Which, coincidentally, I couldn't get into as badly as he begged me to play it. So this is my nod in that direction of what it is that they succeeded very, very well in doing in that game, which is making you think about the idea of, do I need to kill stuff to progress through a video game? Where does that come from? This is the argument. This is the moral argument. Where does that idea that we all have as players come from of morality, of right and wrong? What makes that choice to anybody, whether you happen to be a theist or an atheist, of that little sister, ooh, it would be wrong for me to harvest her, but I get all the Adam, but it's just a video game. But the argument says that there is a universal moral law kind of written on our hearts, that we all are aware of it, and that right there says that there must be a universal moral lawgiver. And if that's true, then that's evidence that God is up there writing stuff. Not just up there, but in here.
Do you have anything to say about the fact that they're called little sisters instead of just some droid kind of a deal?
Oh, well, actually, that's explored really well in the game. The big daddy, little sister thing is all about brainwashing and conditioning and all. And the last part of the game, you actually walk through that part where that conditioning happened. It is super creepy. Super, super creepy. Yeah, I mean, it's like 1960s style Freudian stuff. All right, argument from being. The ontological argument, it's really hard to find a video game example for the idea of being because they kind of all have it. So I went with World of Warcraft. See if you can figure out why. I'm going to go ahead and click through here just so we can have a little bit of visual. How many of you have at one time or another played World of Warcraft? All right, I'm actually going to mute this one because it really doesn't matter. What is World of Warcraft? Tell me. Yeah.
An MMORPG where you get together with people and, well, often play however you like. Most of the time you go through dungeons, try and take down bosses and get some good loot.
Okay, so that stands for Momorpagur. What does that mean?
Massive multiplayer online role-playing game.
Absolutely right. Many of you in this room may not necessarily remember a time before MMORPGs existed. I do. It was kind of revolutionary, the idea that I would be playing in a space where hundreds of other people were also playing. Walking around town was just this weird phenomenon of virtual people in this place playing. And then they went and did an even crazier thing, which is what that represents. Do you know what that event, that in-game event was? It was one of the big expansions.
Cataclysm.
Yeah, the Cataclysm. And what happened was they took the world and they changed it so that there had been a huge cataclysm, basically an apocalypse, inside of the world itself. So from a game design standpoint, this is really weird because what it means is you can't ever play World of Warcraft as you could for the first, call it 8 years, ever again. You just can't. Nobody can. That game state is gone forever. By the way, they're about to do the exact same thing to Hearthstone, if you play Hearthstone, because they're about to nerf a bunch of cards, bring in a new game condition, have wild mode, something they're calling standard mode will now just be the new cards. It'll be like if someone came in and took your magic decks that you had in the 17 cartons and just took magic marker to, half of them, and we're like, Sharpie, sorry, this value has gone down, that sort of a thing, and then burn the rest. Yeah, that's kind of what they're doing. So it's a weird state because they're just virtual cards. There's not any real money invested in it, even though you paid money to get them. Anyway, the idea is this sort of a pervasive world, it isn't real, but I know people who met, married, and have basically parented children in this space. There are church services that meet in this space. People who work and make their living off of these kinds of things. Not necessarily this MMO, but some people have become millionaires and lost millions of dollars in virtual spaces. Back when Second Life was big. The first millionaire that came out of that, the Linden dollars that got converted into real dollars, that was a big deal. So you could argue that there's a lot more reality in this virtuality than we think of. So what does that have to do with my final argument? The argument of being, if you will.
You could think it's and now it exists.
What does that mean?
I create, therefore I inhabit.
Yeah? Yeah? Well, remember the definition that I gave you, that there's 3 artists involved, right? The first artist is the designer. Lots of design went into this game. The evolving and living document, which is the game design document for World of Warcraft, is now in the tens of thousands of pages, virtual pages. It is a living, breathing world in many, many ways. It has a lot of repeating elements, which in and of itself can pull us out of our game experience. But this is one example right here. People wondered for years what was inside that thing, and then after the Cataclysm, it was like, oh, look, there's treasure in there. Oh, that giant. Well, that's what he was protecting that whole time. But I want to challenge you with an idea, okay? The Trinity is a pretty fundamental Christian doctrine, right? Say yes. Yeah, okay. So what would the World of Warcraft Jesus, Messiah, be like? Let's say that to them, this is as real as it gets, right? And then there's this character that shows up. Would he be a player character or would he be a non-player character?
Player.
Yeah, definitely. Does he have mod powers? I would say so, right? The full powers of the designer, right? Sometimes he chooses to use them actively. And elements in the world amazingly change, right? Food just sort of appears out of nowhere, that kind of a thing, right? Of course, that's not that weird in this world. There's magic in this world. But from a mechanical standpoint, what would really be happening? Well, there would be an avatar, and somewhere, in some computer somewhere, would be a mod who sat down and was controlling that character, right? Now, I'm not suggesting that this is how God works, okay? Or that this is the way it happened necessarily. But I'm challenging you to think in terms of metaphor, especially within the context of talking to your gamer friends. Saying, you know what? That's actually kind of a lot like, and then bridging. What if God, the Father, simply transmitted his spirit into his avatar and played the game? Metaphorically. I don't know. You know? These are the kind of things that game design makes me wonder. Because we play these kinds of games and we do these kinds of things and we fantasize whenever we role play. And it's easy for us to do things within the context of a different morality, to be a different size, shape, color. You know, I put down a stat that I have great strength, and even though I don't, you know, I can grab my big battle axe and I can chop an orc in half. It's great. But is that real within the context of that moment and in my imagination? Yeah, it's real. And we can go that direction really easily. We can create so easily. But whenever we start thinking about something that is of a higher level of reality than this reality, suddenly we just shut down. We're like, no, I can't sense it. That's done. Coincidentally, this is the one of the four arguments that doesn't rely on the senses. It's interesting. And so this is the supernatural one, the sort of spiritual one, the philosophical one, indeed. So if I've done what I intended to do tonight, I should be able to make some connections here. Because I'm not trying to explain how this works. I'm challenging you with new metaphors to think beyond the way you might necessarily have been thinking in the past. If God is to us as we are to our games, metaphorically, that is to say, self-existent, outside of their time, the uncaused causer, supremely intelligent and personal. Now, I'm not uncaused, I have a cause, so I know I'm not that. I'm not supremely intelligent, but I am more intelligent than any video game character that's ever come along. And especially since I can control them, and in which case I'm exactly as intelligent as them. And personal, right? I play these games for a personal experience. If this is true, then maybe we shouldn't ask what is a game, but we should ask what is the universe. And if in fact the universe has defined space, defined elements, that's Noah in front of the ark, by the way, defined rules, and defined victory conditions, don't die, then maybe a lot of those metaphors, those gaming metaphors, actually apply a lot more. And when we talk about emergent properties, like being able to reposition a tripwire, and we think about the idea that the designer didn't really intend it, but the universe worked that way. It was designed so well that it worked that way in a way that makes sense within that universe. Maybe we can even say that this whole idea, this problem, this deep problem of predestination, but God knows everything, but, poof, God just doesn't exist at all, because that can't possibly be true. Maybe we're not giving him enough credit for being a really, really good designer. So good, in fact, that he can create a world which has the emergent property of the potential for something that doesn't even include him. And that something, by its nature, because it doesn't include him, we call sin, because it strips us of our holiness, of our ability to be in his presence. But that's a good thing, because that very idea gives us choice. And if we didn't have choice, then it wouldn't be a game in the sense that it wouldn't be interactive. This is a very interactive universe. And so I want to challenge you to think about this idea of, as you act creatively, doing the thing that God does, as you play any game and participate in that act of creation, of that iteration, of that game instance, to remind yourself that you're doing the same thing every day in your life. Tomorrow when you wake up, your character is you, your stats are you, and you have the ability to make moral choices or immoral choices. You have the ability to create or not create. You have the ability to interact or not interact. You have the ability to be better or not better. You have the ability to be fatter or skinnier, whatever it might be, right? And as you play the game of life, you're going to have to ask, whether you are a Christian or a theist or Jewish or anything else that you might be, you're going to have to ask these questions about life. What's the defined space of my life? What are the defined elements of my life? And am I happy with that? What are the defined rules by which I live? Do I make them up? Or are they some set that's imposed upon me that I choose to follow? And at the end of it, the last breath I take, will I have won? Brad.
Do you believe in a level 2?
Do I believe in level 2? I believe in level 2. I don't necessarily believe in level 3. Well, I mentioned C.S. Lewis, so I'll go back to him. He talks about the idea of there being old creation and new creation. And I think that there's a lot of wisdom in that, a lot of really important wisdom. If you are a follower of Jesus Christ, as I am, then you will understand that he is a new creation. He's the firstborn of new creation. And the Bible tells us, the New Testament tells us that you have an eternal aspect to yourself that will also be there in new creation in level 2. The idea of heaven being a cloudy place up there with a big telescope that we can see, and hell is this really hot place that's down at the center of the earth. Honestly, I think there's a lot of poetic metaphor to that, and I think it's a beautiful, brilliant metaphor. Trust me, they will exist if they don't right now. But we are so limited by our linear time thinking of a non-temporal being. I mean, to even say God existed before time is wrong. That's a limitation of our human thinking. Because his existence wasn't even existence in the way we think of existence. You know what I'm saying? So for him to create a time stream and then enter it, that in of itself is just literally more than my human brain can comprehend in anything else than a metaphor. So metaphorically, yes, I absolutely believe in level 2. See you there. More questions, because otherwise I'm kind of done.
I really like how you tied it in. We've talked a lot in our group about like the fine tuning or different theological arguments.
Mm-hmm. I could tell this is a smart crowd.
It really makes sense where if you think of a game and you start analyzing the rules, it makes sense that you might be able to detect purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same way, it seems with the fine tuning of the laws of nature and the initial conditions, it all points to there being a purpose of being able to support life.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's just incredibly improbable otherwise. It really connected with me, so I thought that was just, in a lot of ways, it's a great presentation.
Yeah.
It really makes you think.
You know, the funny thing about the fine-tuning argument specifically, the thing I've always been challenged by that, is when we look at things with a God in the gaps attitude of clearly this world, and you heard me say this earlier, clearly this world was designed for us because it is so fine-tuned. If 1 degree off of this and these 10 million different knobs and all that stuff had been different, we wouldn't exist. Well, yeah, okay, we wouldn't exist, but something different than us might have existed. So that's kind of a hole there. And what if, what if we discover, tomorrow that there is there's a murder gene, right? There's a murder gene. And the murderers that we have in prisons, they have that murder gene. Well, now we understand why murder happens, right? Because there's a murder gene. The problem is this: if you say that our genetics are not separate from our morality in the sense that, okay, maybe you have a murder gene, doesn't mean murder is right or wrong. You know what I've got? I've got an overweight gene. My body is a temple, though. I am told that I am the house of the Spirit of the Lord. I certainly don't always act that way. I certainly don't always treat it that way. But if I was, let's say, morbidly obese, could not leave my house, could not have come here to do this tonight because of the choices I made of the food to put into my own body, then one could argue that was sin. Not necessarily the food itself, but the choices that I made, right? So this is why whenever we talk about genetic predispositions for things here, there, that, the other, I'm always very, very cautious within that. And whenever I look at the fine-tuning argument, I want to say, okay, yeah, that's a really great argument. Let's add it to the pile, right? Because we want to be very careful not to have a God of the gaps kind of an attitude that predominates. I wasn't accusing anyone of having that, by the way.
I was actually just thinking about the ontological argument that you gave.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't really connect your video game argument to the argument that was presented, because the argument that was presented was about how if something is perfect, that perfection must include it existing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really get that same argument from your video game argument with World of Warcraft. I don't really get that argument in general, because you can use, if you stick perfect in front of everything, it argues it must exist.
Well, and I told you that that was a really hard one, and I chose World of Warcraft so that I could use a kind of a different example. But the idea comes back to the basic question of, if you look at a thing, you have to ask, where did the thing come from? If something is, right, it's a state of being. That's probably the most powerful verb we have, to be. And you connect that back to the beginning of Genesis. What is the verb that God used in order to create? He said, he spoke. And what was it he spoke? Let there be. Probably a better translation of all of that moment is simply exist. Be. Right? And this just this powerful moment where the entire universe can't help but not exist because God wanted it to be there. That's an extremely poetic moment. It's an extremely emotional thing if you think about it in those terms. We can't even capture it with our human language. Because if we could, we'd be creating universes, right? That word that he used, whatever it was not even in a spoken kind of a language in that same way. We talk about the Big Bang, right? As sort of a noise metaphor. I believe in the Big Bang. I just know who banged it. You know? That's Frank Turk, by the way. But it's a really good question. The argument from being is, how did we get here? And the answer is, we got here because something was being before we being. It's sort of the unmoved mover, as I think it was Plato. Was that Plato?
Is it really before?
Isn't that the creation argument though? I don't, the teleological.
I will clue you in on a really big, important thing, because you guys are smart. All four of these arguments, really, really close to being exactly the same thing.
Okay, yeah, that would explain it, because from the sound of it, the teleological and the
Yep.
ontological are...
I can summarize all four of them in one thing.
Okay.
God's nature is reflected in our reality. We just happen to think these four things are really important.
Well, like you said, he is. He's going somewhere. And what are the other two? You had those four.
Oh, yeah. I was keying into the awesome thing you were saying, whatever it was. Oh no, hold on. I'll go a few back.
The quad at the very beginning.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. There we go. Yeah.
He makes with purpose, with I don't know how else to say it, but design.
Mm-hmm.
And he's good.
Yeah. And I didn't lay in too hard on this point. Maybe I should have. There's a difference between a designer and a developer, right? The designer figures out what's going to happen, like Ken Levine, the voice that we heard. And the developers, they're the ones who create the actual assets. They're the ones who get in there with the code. They're the ones who get in there with the really great framing systems and decide what's going to be what. And that's usually a team. So what you've got is a being, God, who not only designed but also developed. And that's really important.
Well, when it comes to kingdom of God language
Mm-hmm.
in the New Testament, you got the bride of Christ or the people of God
Sure.
co-creating with him
Yes.
to create that thing called the body
Yes.
of Jesus in the kingdom. So it's almost like he's designer and we're developer.
Yeah. I didn't fully understand the love of the Father until I had my son 2 years ago. We were married for 13 years before we had our first son. And that moment, it was simultaneously terrifying and edifying. And it was unlike anything. And I'd heard it described, and I'd read the poetry and all that. But until I was there in that moment, I just couldn't fully be it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like your first girlfriend or your first kiss or something. You imagine it, but until it's there and it's real. So I think there's a lot to be said for the verbs of God, the eternal, ongoing verbs of God. And you're right, that's really what we're talking about here. All right, in the back.
Back to her comment about not connecting the ontological.
Uh-huh.
I think the reason is because the ontological is dependent on us being able to conceive of God, whereas in video games we don't think about NPCs being able to conceive of players.
Right.
So that's why it's hard to connect. But a good example, you actually already gave it, was in that game where you were playing and killing Mad Max, where you're killing all those people, and then you go talk to this NPC and he says, "What are you doing? Why are you doing it?" It shows, it gives the mimicry of that character has a conception of what a hero should be like.
Yeah. Yeah. The phrase was never used in the video game, but really the question was, is there such a thing as objective morality? Is killing wrong, even though the apocalypse has already occurred?
Or if you were really a player, if you were really our hero,
Uh-huh.
would you do that?
Right.
Would you be the greatest conceivable hero?
Right.
Or would you be just kind of a hero?
Yep.
My question
Mhm.
is,
Nice point.
do you think that God will hold us morally responsible for moral choices in video games?
I love it. That's brilliant. I think God will hold us responsible for the moral choices in our life. Not as a ticker, yes, no, but within the context of opportunities and the overall direction of your life. If by spending time in that video game, it adjusted your thinking in the real world, if you will, and you had a missed opportunity because you were sitting at home instead of going to church that Sunday, then yeah, it's going to affect your life and your decisions and everything that you are. got to understand, on the topic of do video games make people violent, the answer to that question is, do video games affect us? It's a question to a question. And the answer is yes, they do affect us. They're meant to affect us. When you read a book, does it affect you? Yes, you've gained knowledge. Hopefully you had an emotional reaction of some kind to one of the characters. Otherwise, it wasn't a very good book. When you watched a movie and you went, oh, dude, I didn't expect that, then that was a good movie. When you go and you watch a superhero movie and you went, I expected exactly that. That wasn't a very good movie. That one's for you, Will. And you know, the idea of entering into any kind of media at all is you're meant to, and I'm going to contradict myself here by saying you're meant to interact with it. The difference is, in the video game world, you're interacting with it on a different level. You're actually controlling the outcome in a different way. But you're digesting or interacting with books, right? You're digesting and interacting with TV shows. You ever gone back and watched a movie you saw 10 years ago and went, this is a much different movie for me? The movie didn't change. You did. So the answer to your question, as we loop back around to it, is if you're truly worried about the individual moral choices that you're making in your life, ask yourself why that is. Is the trajectory of your life counter to that which God would have you be on? Is playing video games a sin? Not necessarily. If you are addicted to it and it is causing people to leave your life because you're being unloving and you've let your dog die, then we might have an argument. We might have an argument that you're making immoral choices or unethical choices. But I think that there's a lot to be learned from video games, or else I wouldn't have shown you BioShock right out of the gate. M-rated games. You're adults. I think you can handle that idea. Now, I will tell you straight up that I watched the first couple of seasons of Game of Thrones and made excuses as I was watching it until I got to a very specific episode in season, I think, 3 or 4. And I swore it off at that point because I realized what was happening. It was actually an indoctrination of a philosophy that was affecting me. And so I watch for those things in media, and I stay away from them. Do I make the right choices all the time? No. I bet you don't either. But there's a couple of games out there that I would recommend you kind of stay away from. Manhunt is probably one of them. There's really nothing about Manhunt except going and killing people in creative and wonderful ways. Especially the Wii version, because the gameplay is just absolutely terrible.
So is there something to the redemptive side of things? You said, I think you were alluding to the fact that art changes people.
Yeah.
Good art does.
Yeah, it does.
Real art. But in a kind of an ancillary way, the question I already asked.
Briefly was mentioned Dante's Inferno. Okay? If you've read Dante's Inferno, first of all, I'm impressed. And second of all, you're going to immediately recognize upon playing that game that it's nothing like it. It's just loosely based on the idea of it. This, to me, is shameful. This is shameful. Because what I cry out for as a gamer and also as a teacher who says, go make things, is for us to look at these themes, these moral themes. I'll say Christian themes, but even if we had just general morality as themes, I think that we could make some really wonderful art, some wonderful things. What would Macbeth the video game be like? It would be all about murder, I can tell you that. But it would also be all about sin. Dark, dark sin. Losing everything. Discovering that you can't win. That the good guy is not the good guy. He's the bad guy. That kind of a thing. I think that's sort of I think we're on the threshold of being able to do that. Graphics are in a great place right now. Sound design is in a pretty great place right now. We've got huge teams of designers doing all these wonderful things. And then when we look out there at what Christian video games are, you're going to find like Bible Man. What? it's tough to get the funding, and it's tough to sell the game, and it's tough to do that within that context. But maybe it doesn't have to be quite so overt. I'm not suggesting we trick people, but I am suggesting that we use themes that are universally important to us as human beings.
Pixelings, perhaps? Pixelings, like inklings, but pixels?
Oh, I see what you did there. I like that. I'm changing the name of the group. No, I'm not.
Trademark.
Yeah.
I was saying literature, Chronicles of Narnia is not overt.
And Byron and I just finished rereading that for our class. I tell you, you want to challenge yourself, read it in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
I didn't read it all.
Yeah,
I
found the audio too. The endorsed one by the what was the
I just went old school.
I don't know. Anyway.
I got the discs.
Oh, did you? Oh, library. No, that was an idea. I get everything on the internet, see. So, but I don't want to download it either, like illegally download it. So I found an officially endorsed one from the. Anyway, there was a question in that in C.S. Lewis. No.
No, just an observation.
Yeah.
You said we don't want to be too overt and do Bible names.
Right, but you know what?
So I'm saying we need pixelings.
We were trying to have that. They were making the movies, they were doing a bad job, they had terrible funding, the CG was awful, they were bad films. They were low quality and they just weren't that great. When you stand them up next to Harry Potter, you stand them up next to even Lord of the Rings, which my wife and I watched that extended edition every New Year's. It's fantastic. It's like 12 hours, by the way, if you ever. But why? Why couldn't
Exactly.
Narnia be that high quality? What is it about it that everybody kind of went, ooh, no, Christian, no. Was that what happened? I don't know. So I challenge you guys in this room who have that motivation to be the ones to succeed in promoting quality media that is meaningful. Yeah.
Excuse me. Did you have a question?
Oh, yeah. I was just, you might have said this already, but do you practice a religion?
Me personally? I'm Southern Baptist. I'm one of the worst. Yeah. I go to Prairie Creek Baptist Church. My pastor is a gamer, which is pretty fantastic. We have a, First Friday game night is what we call it. We get together for board games. You are all more than welcome to come. It's on 15th Street. Also, I have a personal gaming group that if you're interested in playing some board games on Saturday nights, come talk to me. Email me or something, adambracken.com, and just hit my email and so on, and tell me why you're interested. I will take interviews. At least I'll put you on the Facebook group. How about that? Yeah?
What game have you played that has best integrated kind of religious themes? Not necessarily Christian, but religious in general.
Wow. That's deep.
In a good, really good game.
Religious themes, I'm going to defer, but moral themes, I will actually point to some of the Telltale games that they've been coming out with, the story games that they've been coming out with, like Walking Dead, for example. As I said, it felt like a meaningful moral choice that I was having to make with a little girl watching what I was doing and remembering. That was deep. But you may feel like I'm fishing for something here, but I really am not. The answer that I would come up with for the religious thing, Minecraft. Honestly and truly. We did a thing here on campus whenever I was a professor here, where we took a USB drive, we put Minecraft on it, and we played till we died. Now this is back in like beta, when dying actually meant something pretty significant. There was no food meter, you know. And you played until you died, and you handed off to another, and someone else would enter that world with their own character, and they would see the stuff that had been there, and then play them until they died. And we passed it around the lab. Everybody had a crack, and you weren't allowed to talk about it until afterwards, and the last person had it, and then we put it all up on the big screen, and we walked through it. And we were like, I did that. Who made that sign? Who built that thing? That was amazing. Whose grave was that? Because there was one guy, he was too good, and he'd been playing for a couple of days, and so he actually built himself a grave, got up on top of the mountain, and jumped into it. But you want to talk about religious metaphor within that context. You're walking around, you're going, why is this here? What did this mean? Who came before me? What was their intent with this? Fascinating study in religious archaeology and anthropology.
Wow. You get a similar experience by looking through empty second life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can. Talk about a dead world. Mm-hmm.
Kind of like Charn in Narnia. Right?
Oh,
Dead
yeah.
World.
Yep.
Well,
Are we closing in?
I haven't played this game, but have you heard one called Ether Light?
No, I don't know what that is.
Okay, because I was referred to it. It's like a Christian game, but it's not overtly so.
Uh-huh.
It has a different plot line, made by some Scandinavian company in English.
Huh, cool. No, I'll take a look at it. Thanks. Yeah.
You ever heard, the Myst series of games?
Oh, yeah.
I really like those because I like the way that at the end of them they always make you make some kind of choice.
Good connection, yeah.
Is that NYSC?
Yeah, NYSC.
I tell you, a recent one that just came out called The Witness. Not a Christian game, but almost like Myst in that you walk around, you do these puzzles that kind of teach you, and there's something that happened on this island, you don't know what it is, and it kind of teaches you as you go. That's kind of a religious sort of a make you think type of thing. I'm not sure it has much moral edification in it, especially when you get to the videos, but it feels a lot like Myst. So if you liked Myst, check out The Witness. Yeah.
Would you say that there are more games that have demonic or dark forces behind them than games that actually have like good moral standings?
You mean that in a literal sense? It's a thing created by humans. So if you think that a thing created by humans has that influence, then I would say it probably has about as much as any other media form. The truth is, we live in a fallen world. Creation fell with man. The Bible talks about that. Genesis talks about that. And when we create within this world as co-creators, we still have the capacity to create, even if it's to create things that are not edifying, things that are not good, things that are not, headed in the right direction, if you will. So if you subscribe to that philosophy that the demons are actively involved in the things that we create, then I suppose, yeah, there's probably just as much as in any other media form. But I think that there is a wisdom of crowds of a sort, not necessarily a moral wisdom, but at least whenever we talk about things like the ESRB, right, the Entertainment Ratings Board, whatever that stands for, then they're doing their job very well. It's a weird little system. It's actually quite simple. The developers send off a video of their games, which is counterintuitive. They send off video. 3 people look at it, they judge it, they rate it, and if they basically agree on a blind sort of taste test, that's the rating the game has. But you know what? By and large, it really works well. So if you've got a parent who is exposing their kid to an M-rated game or even a teen-rated game before that time is right, there's no telling what you're letting in. Because games, they're shiny discs, and we like shiny things, right? But the truth is, who knows what's on that disc? You remember the hot coffee scandal from the GTA? Yeah, where it turned out that there was this basically interactive sex scene that was locked away so that they wouldn't have an adult-only rating. But because it was harder for them to remove the code than to just simply shut down the code, they left it on the disk so you couldn't get to it. But then people created mods so you could, but only on the PC version. And then suddenly everybody's screaming and yelling and like, what's going on? How dare you ship that with that content? Even when they were trying, it's Rockstar we're talking about here, to be good citizens and going for a specific rating for a specific audience. They didn't want to ship actual interactive porn. That was not their goal. So anybody who went out and downloaded the mod to experience this, guess what? They were seeking it out. So be careful what you seek out is my caution. Because I think there's more demonic influence there than in the act of creation. Humans left to the act of creation.
About enough.
Cavemen were putting dirty pictures on walls, guys. This is not a new thing that we've discovered. Right. Yeah, this is why I gave up PC gaming, actually, is because the modding community does not do anything for me. I'm just not that interested in that process. The exception being Minecraft. That's the way I play Minecraft. But well, then let me leave you with this idea, okay? I actually cut this from my presentation because it was a little off topic, but you guys have brought me there on your own.
See, we're interactive and we are.
You're amazing.
Making the game
You
go
guys
our
are
way.
amazing. I need to come up here regularly, more regularly, and just sit out there in the chairs with you guys. Are you familiar with this game that's about to come out? It has 15 quintillion worlds.
No Man's Sky.
No Man's Sky. Okay. Now here's the thing about No Man's Sky. It may or may not end up being the thing that kills Minecraft. I don't know. It may or may not be something that lasts for a while. It may or may not be as good as we hope it is. But I can tell you it did one thing that's going to last forever. The Create Universe button. Pushing the button created a algorithm, if you will, particular seed, if you will, for the one universe, not like Minecraft, where there's every time you do it, it's a new seed. The one universe that we will all be playing in. And when you go to a specific place, the seed will look and see what kind of thing should be generated there, and will generate it. Of course, it's moddable, so we can have upgrades, we can have new things, lots of different plant life, animal life, all of these different things. But if we truly are at a place, developmentally, in our video game development, where we can hit a Create Universe button and 15 quintillion worlds be possible out of what we have done from the material that we have seeded it with, then we are on the threshold of a new kind of game. The kind of game where Skyrim, as we say, can be played in either story mode or life mode. It can be played as an MMO, or it can be played as my own personal walkthrough of it on my own little planet, on my own little thing, right? And if games are getting to this place where we can do that, it's going to give us a whole nother space for interacting. We think Facebook now and Twitter now is interacting, right? We're discovering, as we get older especially, that some of our relationships are feeling kind of shallow when they're only on Facebook. But maybe a virtual space will let us get some of that back. I don't know. I don't know. But very soon there's going to be a new mission field is what I'm saying.
Wow.
And that mission field is going to be an interactive space. It's going to be an interactive, not Second Life, but something, yeah, something that feels weirdly different than the internet we have today.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a place to drop off, but doesn't seem like anybody wants to. I'm glad you came. I'm glad you stayed. I'm glad you're considering coming back next fall.
Yay.
And even coming to our party. Look
party?
on Reasonable Faith UTD on the flat world of Facebook.
Appreciate
Let's
it.
give 'em a hand.